You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
The biggest mistake that writers make is keeping in their babies, which are scenes that they think are amazing or like they show this great aspect, but really they don't progress the story. They're there because the writer loves his own writing and nothing really more than that.
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button, and thanks again for joining me for another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. So in a little slice of my personal life, if you follow me on social media or maybe even listen to this podcast in certain episodes, my car is a bane of my existence. My car is actually in the shop again. I can't switch gears out of park, so I have to take it to the shop tomorrow again. And on top of that, I have a job interview tomorrow. The car also needs 4 new tires. And in the 2 years that I've had it, I've had to replace the battery, driver's side power mirror. This malfunction indicator light keeps coming on, and it slowed down on me twice when I was at a red light. And the kicker is, it only has 32,000 miles on it. So for anyone listening out there, if you do win that $1 billion Powerball, please remember your old pal Dave. So in better news, I was included in Mentorlist's 11 top podcasts for film and creativity. I'll link to the article in the show notes. So I want to say thank you to Natalie, who runs Mentorlist, for thinking so highly of this podcast. And if you don't know Mentorlist, it's a web resource full of articles and tips on becoming a better filmmaker and writer. Tell them Bullis sent you, and you heard about him on this podcast. And speaking of podcasts, I wrote a blog post where I've received some traction about my latest podcast setup. And I went through in detail about all the things I have set up for this podcast. A spoiler alert, I'm going to be changing some of this very soon, and I'm going to update the blog post as well. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm adding a windscreen to my mic in addition to my pop filter, and I'm also going to upgrade my board to the next version that I have now. So if you're interested in updating that list, but I'm also going to be selling this board on either eBay or social media, and I also have a few other pieces of gear that I can sell, including a Blue Yeti mic that I used one time, and it's literally pristine. We're not even using it anymore, so there's no point in really having it. So when I put that up on eBay or whatever, I will post that in the show notes, and you'll get a pretty good deal on it. And again, I want to say thank you to everyone who uses my Amazon affiliate link whenever they buy through Amazon. Every purchase, no matter how small, supports this podcast. And I also want to thank you to everyone who shares the episodes on social media and who rates and reviews this on iTunes. Now, coming up on the podcast, I have Matt L. Lohr, who co-wrote a book with the late, great Dan O'Bannon, which is the guide to screenplay structure in the Dan O'Bannon style. Dan O'Bannon, he wrote Alien, and he also wrote Return of the Living Dead. He has such a great way of writing, and I'm so thankful this book came out because it's actually by a screenwriter who's actually written pretty damn good movies. I mean, Alien is phenomenal, and Return of the Living Dead is, the zombies talk in that one, and I'm not really sure some people got that. Like, I'm not a guy who likes zombies that talk. I'm more of a Romero guy, but I still appreciate Return of the Living Dead, and I think it's a great movie anyway. So Matt L. Lohr, who co-wrote the book with Dan, will be coming on the show, and he'll be talking all things screenwriting, and also we're inching closer and closer to episode 100, and I'm finalizing the details with the mystery guest for that episode. And, after this episode, which is 92, we're only going to have 8 more episodes left. See, I can do basic math. But anyways, everyone, let's talk about today. Joining me today is Ron Peters. Ron is a screenwriter, story editor, and script consultant. We talked The Wolf of Wall Street, Twin Peaks Season 3, Fury, and a bunch of other stuff. Ron and I were just going back and forth so quickly. There's so much going on with Ron and what he's working on. And we talk about his process, the projects he's worked on, and he even shares with us a alternate ending, the original ending actually, to The Wolf of Wall Street. So here we are, episode 92 with Ron Peters.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Joining me today is Ron Peters. Ron is a screenwriter, story analyst, and editor. He is known for his work on the TV series Luck, and also the movies Defiance, The Wolf of Wall Street, Fury, and the upcoming Now You See Me 2. Ron, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave, for having me.
So, Ron, could you give us, a little bit about your background and how you got started in writing?
Yeah, well, I kind of started really young. My mom would bring home these really fancy, hardbound journal notebooks from where she worked, and I would just kind of write and draw in them, unbeknownst to me that they were actually like worth $150. And then my mom would get angry at me for coloring and writing stories in them. And then that moved on to somewhere around the age of 7 or 8. My mom had a digital camera, which were popular at the time, and you could record 15 seconds of video at most. And so my brother and I would make these little home movies with each shot being no more than 15 seconds. And then from there, I was drawn to the media classes in high school, and I made a couple films while I was in high school, and actually had that I wrote and directed, and had a like kind of partnership with the school, whereas I could miss half of school to go make this movie, which we had gone out and got investors for, and then eventually got a small East Coast distribution for, and also chose to donate all the profits to the American Cancer Society. So that's kind of how I got started. And then that film, my second one of those films, the first one was called Friends of Crime, and the second one was called Joey Rothstein and the Commission. And that second film got me noticed at a film festival, and I was lucky enough to get a letter of recommendation from Ed Zwick, the director. And that kind of then started me on my way. And then I started working on Defiance, which is an Ed Zwick film right after that. And it's just kind of steadily grown from there. And now I'm lucky enough where I'm at the point where I get to travel a lot and be on set for all these big, much bigger films, these huge studio films. And that's really the best benefit, is to be able to see the world and see all these different cultures.
How are you able to convince the school to let you miss, half of school to do the movie, though? I mean, did you have to get your parents involved and talk to the principal and something like that?
I don't think they actually got involved. I was kind of, honestly, I was kind of very lucky enough when I was a kid. I was kind of very charming, and I kind of used that, and in some cases abused it, to get what I wanted as far as making these movies. I was just always drawn to it. I was always something that, like, honestly, my parents really didn't support that decision of being a quote unquote artist. There was many fights with my father about it. But it was just something that I was always drawn to. And I was kind of hard-headed in the fact that I wasn't going to let anybody tell me what to do, or that I couldn't do something. And I honestly think I just went down to the principal's office and said, "Hey, I'm doing this film." And a big selling point I remember was the fact that we were donating all the profits to the American Cancer Society, and they used it as like I think like an out of work program is something that they called it.
Well, that's that's pretty cool how you're able to, charm your way to do that. Because when you were telling the story, I could just imagine somebody pitched that idea nowadays. They'd be like, "What? Are you kidding me?" So, it's just interesting to see how things have changed. Maybe there is, a principal out there who would be, very, what's what I'm looking for? Very encouraging to students.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting, because when I was in high school, whenever we had like, I mean, I love to write, but at the time in high school, I was really attracted to directing and using the camera to tell stories. I mean, I would write them out, I would flush them out, usually through very, very long treatments at the time. They weren't like full-on scripts, except for the two films. But I would always try and barter and negotiate with my teacher. If we had like a project, or we had to write a 5-page paper on something, I would convince them in many cases that I could make a video that would demonstrate my knowledge of the subject much better than if I were to write it in a 5-page essay. And then we can show it to the class, and kids can talk about it, and it could be a fun way to learn this. And in most cases, I remember making one in social studies on Roe v. Wade. I remember making one in English class on racism. Man, and that's what I would do. And it's funny because nowadays a lot of kids are doing that as well. When I go back to my old high school and I talk to some of my teachers, they tell me that a lot of kids are, one, given the privilege to do it, but are also really interested in doing it that way and making videos as far as their projects go.
It's interesting because I was able to do that in my high school. We actually shot a episode, a Romeo and Juliet, but we actually shot it as an episode of Jerry Springer. So we had like
That's brilliant.
we had the Capulets and the what is it, the Montagues?
Montagues, yeah.
Yeah. And we had each side, and they would bring out their guest, and we had a guy playing Jerry Springer. The teacher said in his analysis of it, you got a written feedback,
right,
and he's like, this is either the best entry to for this class, or this is the worst entry in this class, and I'm not quite sure.
That's usually a good thing, though. That's usually a good thing.
Yeah. It's just funny. You just reminded me when you were talking about that. So we were
better that way. I mean, it's like sometimes school can be boring. I get it, but like when you give the kids freedom to express their knowledge of the subject, like making Romeo and Juliet out of Jerry Springer, or any other way, in the way that they know that they feel is best to express it, I am all for that. And I just think that's more engaging, more entertaining. And also, there's more learning involved in that way.
Yeah, I concur. And, with everything going towards video, and especially mobile video now, I think it's encouraging to hear that they're allowing students to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, you mentioned you travel the world a lot. I know I saw, we actually met on Instagram, and, I saw all these great photos, from all over the world. So, basically, I guess you can do that now because, if somebody needs to hire you, Ron, they can just obviously email you, and you can be in Iceland or China or Thailand. And, there's not really that big of a difference, right? Because you're still going to communicate through either email or Skype, right?
Yeah. I mean, thanks to Skype and FaceTime and email, it makes it a lot easier. I still have to, like, I'm in Los Angeles right now, and I still have to come back here for a lot of, whether it's just pre-production meetings or script meetings, because everything kind of starts here and then goes out. But yeah, I mean, the technology has has shrunk the world in a sense.
Yeah, very true. I actually know he was a former exec at Fox, and he actually basically retired at, I think, around the age of 50, 55. And what he does now is he travels the world. And he just that's his whole thing now. And I'm still trying to get him on to come on the podcast. But now he just he'll go to China. He takes a video with his phone. He uploads it. He does interviews with people from all over the world. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think travel breeds maturation. I think you really get a sense. You get a broader sense of life when you travel and you see how different people interact, react, eat, treat others, live, go by their day-to-day things. I just think when you see that the broad diversity in the world that there is with that, I don't know. For me, it just really brings a sense of I don't know how to say it, but I don't want to say maturity, but it feels like maturity is what it feels like.
I get what you're saying. It definitely, it's kind of like that TV show, An Idiot Abroad, with Carl Pilkington.
I love that show. That show's hilarious.
Because Stephen Merchant, when he left, he said to him, he goes, Carl, traveling, I really think broadens the mind. And of course, they're trying to get him to understand other people's cultures. And he barely can live in the British culture as it is, but
and they throw him under the bus so hard. They put him in like every horrible situation possible, which is kind of funny because he's like the perfect person to be put in that situation as far as like us as viewers to watch him. But man, I feel bad for him sometimes.
Yeah, some of the countries and some of the things they had him do, it was just it was absolutely hilarious. And his reaction to everything is is to basically he just doesn't understand anything. And for anyone who hasn't seen it that is listening to this, I'll link to it in the show notes. But it's a great show that I highly recommend. Ron, just to as we sort of talk about all your experiences and everything like that, you got involved in the TV show Defiance. I mean, sorry, the movie Defiance.
Yeah.
Which actually has Daniel Craig in it. So how did you actually get involved with the movie?
Through Ed Zwick, who saw my second film, and we met, and he was very, very gracious, kind of in his praise and in his offering to bring me on board, that this film that we're working on right now, I'd love for you to take a look at the script. I love what you can possibly bring as far as writing, and that was pretty much it. And then that's really what opened a lot of doors afterwards for me.
So when you get the script, okay, so when you got the script for Defiance, what was one of the first things that you did with the script? I mean, did you read it cover to cover and not make any notes, or do you take a red pen out and write ideas down as you're going?
Yeah. Wow, Defiance was like almost 8 years ago or something like that. But yeah, every script is kind of different. Usually I'll read it first page to last page, no notes. Maybe I'll jot an idea down here or there, but I just want to see if I would enjoy this film at the theater first. And then from there, I'll break it down structurally. And from there, then after structurally, I'll go character. And it's interesting because I go character second, but character I think is almost more important than structurally, because you can have a great structure of a screenplay, but if you don't have entertaining or interesting characters, it's still boring. We're not going to learn anything. We're not going to be able to relate to anybody on screen. And so that's kind of my process, but it always differs per script, to be honest. Like with Wolf, okay, I got to be honest. So when I work on a script, I also find myself and my lifestyle kind of molding a bit towards what I'm working on. So, like, for instance, when I was working on Wolf, you're going out with your friends a lot, you're having fun, you're kind of experiencing it, you're taking that as quote unquote research for what you're working on, and then I engage myself in that lifestyle, versus when I was working on Fury, it was very regimented. I would make my bed every morning, and so for me personally, that's kind of almost how I work. I've noticed that subconsciously at this point in my life, but so that's why it depends. It differs every script. I mean, sometimes, like with Fury, I'll be very, very detail oriented, and I'll use a specific pen, and a specific number 2 pencil, and I'll make sure it's sharpened to the point every time before I write. And little things like that really, for me, keep me in it. Make me believe, if that makes sense.
I see exactly what you mean. I think, once we get in that mindset, and, it's almost like how an actor does method acting. It's almost like method writing.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, not to sound pompous, but as a writer, when you are writing, you are God. You are playing God. You can puppeteer the characters, the setting, the weather, any which way you want. So you literally have the responsibility of God when you're writing. And you have to put yourself in the shoes of each and every character, no matter how much you dislike or how much of a jerk or an asshole a certain character is. You have to put yourself in their shoes, because no matter how bad of a person someone thinks another person is, we all do things for what we think are the right reasons, personally. Like Hitler, horrible, horrible person. But what he thought in his head, he was doing the right thing. Though I don't agree with that, for the record. I don't agree. I thought Hitler was a fucking idiot, and what he did was absolutely horrible. But when you look at it from the perspective of a writer, when you have an antagonist, when you have a villain in your film, your screenplay, whatever it is that you're writing, you have to put yourself in their shoes and try and see and understand, why do they think this is the right thing that they're doing? And so that's why kind of, it's like method. You have to do that for the responsibility that you have to the story.
You know, I think Mickey Rourke is somebody who said it best when he said that most writers don't understand the antagonist. He said sometimes, or sorry, most of the time, they're just evil for the sake of being evil. And, you know, it's like you said, you know, you have to put yourself in their shoes and have to make it believable as to why they're doing what they're doing. Because in reality, you know, nobody really gets up one morning and says, I'm going to be evil today. But you know,
exactly. And the character, the lead character, the protagonist isn't going to be, the protagonist is only as strong as his or her antagonist. Depending on how hard that the antagonist hits back at him to stop him from reaching his goal, is only going to show you how strong of the protagonist that he really is.
As we talk about the antagonist and the protagonist, you know, you also worked on, you know, the script for the movie The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, Ron, I walked into the movie and I didn't know what to expect. I know it was Scorsese, and I walked out and I was like, wow, that was 10 times better than I thought it was going to be. It reminded me a lot of Leaving Las Vegas. Wait, not Leaving Las Vegas. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Leaving Las Vegas is a very down movie.
Yeah, but it's a great film as well. It's a great film. My favorite line, just this quick side note, my favorite line from Leaving Las Vegas is when Nick Cage is poking his head out the car window and he's like, you got a great ass, but shut your head all the way up it. I love that quote. Anyways.
It reminded me of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So, you know, when you get a script like The Wolf of Wall Street, you know, how do you handle something like that that really doesn't have a clear, I mean, we have a clear protagonist, which is Jordan Belfort,
right.
But, you know, our antagonist could be a couple of different things. But when you get a script like that, Ron, you know, how do you work through that?
Well, first off, Terry Winter, who was the head writer on Wolf of Wall Street, the main guy, he did a fantastic job. And that script was actually drafted like 6 or 7 years before we went into production on it. And I remember working with Terry, and he would tell me that him and Marty would talk, and Terry specifically said, I'm going to kind of mold this structurally after Goodfellas. Terry was like, I feel like this story would be perfectly told in that type of sense. And so we started with that. And we start with that structure and that kind of idea of this one man's almost life story through all the crazy experiences he has, and is he even going to make it out alive in the end? And you have characters like Dignam, who's your FBI, and you can say like actual physical character of an antagonist. But also in those films, what makes them also kind of relatable is the source of antagonism as far as Jordan Belfort's greed himself, and how many quote unquote pleasures that can bring you, but at the same time, how many pains and forces to stop you from having the other aspects of life that you want, like say a family and children, where how greed and self-obsession can turn into a drug addiction, can turn into this, and can really hinder you from having what I think are the lasting things in life. So there's also other sources of antagonism besides physical. And sometimes those are, to me, more interesting.
I concur, because, you know, as I was watching the movie, you know, I was realizing, you know, Jordan's worst enemy is himself.
Yeah.
And also, you know, as we're watching this movie, the conflict is really with himself. It's a lot of internal conflict that plays out externally.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because that own internal conflict is also kind of what drives him and motivates him and inspires him to make more money, to go out and do these illegal things. And it's so interesting to me, like that type of characterization.
It really did. And you know, the ending really, it was very interesting too, because it didn't end in the way that I thought it was going to end. I wasn't too familiar with Jordan's story, you know, going into it, but when at the end, when he's just simply tells the guy, sell me this pen, it's actually pretty thought provoking too, because, you could be taken a number of different ways. And the way that I took it was basically you'd have to say to Jordan, when he says, sell me this pen, you take the pen from him and say, could you write your name down? And then when he says, oh, can you, when Jordan have to say, well, I need a pen for that, that's when you try to sell him the pen.
Right.
But it's interesting because even now Jordan goes on seminars like that, and he tries to, he's selling people the experience. He's doing all this other stuff. So it's all pretty interesting how the movie ties together in the end.
Yeah, and that actually wasn't the original ending either. I'm trying to remember. I talked about this a lot when I was doing press for it when the film came out, but the original, man, I honestly don't remember the original ending right now off the top of my head. But I know like a lot of the stuff that was actually in the beginning, as far as like his backstory, was also kind of towards the end. Oh wait, you know what? Maybe I have the script. I can just kind of pull out the original script. If you give me 5 minutes, we can keep talking, and I'll try and find the original script to see if I can pull it up here.
Okay, that sounds great. So as we sort of talk about movies and stuff like that, about the tension and goals and stuff like that, so again, when you're reading these scripts, I often wonder, what screenplay readers and consultants and everything, I know that everybody sort of has a different way of looking at things, but I think one thing that everyone has to look for are two things. What number one is, what is the core of the story? And number two is, what is the essence of every scene? Now, is that something that you do when you're reading the scripts?
Yeah. The biggest mistake that writers make is keeping in their babies, which are scenes that they think are amazing, or like they show this great aspect, but really they don't progress the story. They're there because the writer loves his own writing and nothing really more than that. But it's actually really interesting because I get the title of script analyst and script coordinator and script editor for my credit. But it's really interesting because I'm not always a huge fan of necessarily what I do for a lot of writers, because it becomes a crutch. And I think writers should have more trust and faith in themselves. I've kind of carved out this niche where studios bring me in a lot for structural reasons, or like quick scene rewrites is what I found myself to be doing a lot. I don't always necessarily go over the entire script. I mean, Wolf I did, Now You See Me I did, Fury I did, Defiance, yeah. But like, for instance, like scenes like for Funny People, I also just recently worked on the TV show, the reboot of Twin Peaks. And I was simply just brought in for that to give them a younger demographic's eyes on the story, if they could see somebody younger being able to relate to it. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of them out there, and it's funny that we're talking about this at the same time we just got done talking about like Jordan Belfort and people that go out there and sell this lifestyle, or like everybody's obsessed with DJ Khaled right now and everything that he sells on his social media stuff. And there's that guy Ty Lopez on YouTube that talks about his Ferrari and books and all that stuff. Oh, excuse me. So I don't know. So there's some good ones out there and there's some bad ones, but if I would give any advice to writers, it would be to trust themselves more with their own writing. I know it's a demon. I know you got to battle it daily, but just mount up and just trust yourself. That's the biggest thing that a lot of people forget, is their own uniqueness. A lot of people forget that they have a unique equation of experiences that only they have gone through up until this point where they're at in their life. And nobody else has gone through that exact equation of experiences or had that exact reaction after that experience. And I just say, don't discredit it, credit yourself.
One of the best books on writing I've ever read, was Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's about, every day it's about resistance and, going in there and doing the, best work that you can. And, Stephen, for those of you who are familiar with the podcast, I talk a lot about Stephen Pressfield, and next to me right now is 4 books of his that are just, I think, absolutely phenomenal. Anyone who wants to be a writer should at least read The War of Art. But again, like you said, Ron, it's about going in there, trusting yourself, and just beating that monster every single day.
Yeah, and anybody who wants to be a writer should be reading every day. They should be reading every day. They should be writing every day. They should not be relying on their quote-unquote inspiration or their feeling of, oh, I feel like writing, I have something to say today. No, you become a good writer because you put in the work, because you write every day. And not every day is going to be good. And you have to accept that 75% of what you write or type is going to be garbage and shit, and it's going to go straight to the trash. But you have to accept it. It's part of the craft. And writing is rewriting. So you come in every day as if it were a 9 to 5, and you sit down. There's a German phrase called Sitzfleisch, which means sticking your ass to the chair, and you just sit there and you bleed, or you type, or you throw yourself into it. Whatever words that you choose that get yourself in that emotional state of being able to do it. That's all you really have to do. Read, write every day, day in, day out. And that's the best, advice I can give.
I actually just received some of the 2015 best screenplays of the year. I've been people send me them in emails, and I put together a photo of them. And I pick up the movies I haven't seen yet, like Bridge of Spies. I'm gonna read that probably today or tomorrow. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I want to read the screenplay first. Although it might spoil the movie, I hear it's awesome. I just want to dissect it, and I would be verbose if I didn't at least mention that I'm very jealous that you got to read the Twin Peaks scripts, because I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan, and I love David Lynch. When he was here in Philly, I went to go see him, and like tickets sold out like literally in minutes to go see him, and I picked up 2 as soon as they went on sale. I am just a huge fan of all his work.
Yeah, and he's an amazing man too. I worked on that show kind of at the same time as I was coming out of a relationship, of a breakup, and he really helped me. I mean, he's really big into the transcendental meditation and whatnot, but he really helped me as far as finding a sense of peace as a man, and also as an artist, because that was many conversations we had about the struggle of being an artist. And as an artist, should you constantly be feeling despair and sadness so you can put it into your work? Like, is there something wrong with feeling happy as an artist? And we talked a lot about that, and he really guided me in a good way. So I have nothing but praise for David. I mean, he's such an auteur too. I mean, he's such a maestro at his craft, and he knows exactly what we wanted. The show almost didn't happen actually because David's requests for how to shoot it were very specific, and Showtime didn't want to up the budget. And so like this could have the show could have been started to shoot like a year ago, but because of that, maybe not a year ago, maybe like 9 months ago, but because Showtime didn't want to up the budget, they were being kind of stingy in that sense. It got delayed, and then finally they gave in, and we were able to start shooting like 3 months ago.
That's great that they were able to finally, come to an agreement, because somebody actually asked him when he was here in Philly, probably about a year and a half ago. They actually said to him, what are you making next? Do you have anything on the pipeline? And he said, well, no, I'm not working on anything right now. And then about, I think, maybe a month after that at most, the promo video for Twin Peaks Season 3 came on. And I was like, oh my God, this is phenomenal. And yeah, I mean, I know it's next year. I think they said it's going to be released. But I mean, honestly, I can't wait.
Yeah. All I can say about it is damn good coffee.
Trust me, if you could talk about it, I'd probably talk your ear off. And I know you can't mention anything. But just to continue your work and everything, you got to work on Fury, which was a the World War II movie with Brad Pitt. when you got that script, that's sort of, very interesting movie because it's a lot of, at least in the first half, is a lot of, battle scenes.
Yeah.
Very heavy, detailed battle scenes. Obviously it's a World War II movie, so there's going to be some tank battles. Again, you probably had to switch gears a little bit because I'm sure, there was probably a lot of detailed action scenes in the script, or maybe I'm completely mistaken and there wasn't. But so how did you go about, working with, the script for Fury?
Well, the biggest difference from going from Wolf to Fury was Fury is written by David Ayer. It's also directed by David Ayer. So the script already, like, you see how he's going to shoot it. I mean, I'm very familiar with David and how he films. However, Fury was one of the first films that he didn't use so much handheld cameras. If you watch some of David's earlier films, he does a lot of handheld camera filmmaking. And with Fury, Sony really wanted smooth shot. I mean, David also really wanted smooth shots. They were giving him a much bigger budget. So they kind of wanted this very, because the battle scenes were going to be gory. There's going to be mud, there's going to be blood, there's going to be bullets flying, tanks firing. That they wanted to shoot it kind of almost glossy in the sense where, like, there's cranes and it's smooth and there's tracking shots. There's not gritty camera movement that's interfering with the viewer interacting with the battle scenes themselves. And so you could see it in the script how kind of it was already going to be shot. There's a little bit of camera directions, which usually aren't in the script, but because David's the writer-director on it, he already has it in his head how he wants to shoot it. And so that was the biggest change of going to Fury from Wolf, because usually then the next step in the process would be for the script writer and the team to go with the director, and the director then has to decide how he wants to shoot it, versus skipping that step completely because the writer is the director and he's already got it in his head how he wants to shoot it. So Fury was just more structurally. There wasn't there wasn't too much. David's so good with character work. He's so good. He almost starts with, I think that's actually what he starts with when he writes, is he starts with characters. So there wasn't much character work that needed to be done with that. I mean, it was, when we talked about the script, it was talked about, this is a character piece. And it's about this group of guys, how they're all different and how they're all going through the same thing and how it's affecting each one of them. And like scenes, if you've seen the movie, the scene where they go up into the little town home and they have the two women make them some food, and Logan also hooks up with the one girl. But that scene was meant to be written as if it could be played out on a stage, like for theater. So it was just, I guess it was just very different working with a writer-director, because he already has it in his head how he wants to shoot it, and you just go with that, and it almost kind of makes the process a little bit easier, because there's less cooks in the kitchen, so to speak.
Yeah, that would make the process. I understand completely what you mean. That would make the process easier. And I sort of imagine too that when he did see the script, he probably knew, okay, we don't need to add too many details to this because I already know what it's going to be. If you know what I'm saying, like he already knew, obviously this is going to be a scene that I've already storyboarded myself, so we don't need to worry too much about that. And it was, I'm sure, that probably took, okay, well, this is a little bit easier now, because now we don't have to, now there's less things we have to worry about. So if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And he is so intelligent he's a military man himself. So he's so intelligent on all aspects military. Like usually there's a fact checker that comes into play, but with David, none was really needed. He knows that stuff like the back of his hand.
Yeah. Cause the movie actually had one of the last working Tiger tanks in the world.
Yep.
Because I think there's two left. I think the British have one, and I think the other one is in a tank museum in Russia. But That was amazing. You were actually able to use a actual Tiger tank for the movie.
Yeah, yeah. I remember shooting days in outside of London for that. They were just, I mean, you would wake up and you would feel like you were in a war camp. Like it was, it was crazy. It was a really cool experience.
That's either a very good thing or a very bad thing. Like, oh my God, we're in a war camp.
Well, yeah, it's funny because when you look back on, when you work on all these films, you kind of almost have like these different parts of your life that you like, you get to experience. And sometimes they're not always good. Sometimes you know, you're having to work on material that is maybe a bit depressing or a bit sad, and it kind of brings you down. But I can say that for every film that I've ever worked on, I look back on them and they were all amazing learning experiences, no matter if I was extremely happy or extremely down working on the material that I was at the time. But looking back, I mean, nothing but gratitude for all of them.
I saw a psychologist. He wrote this article that if you spend more money on experiences than actual things, you're going to be happier. And making these movies, even when, I've been a part of independent movies and stuff. Some were very good, some were bad, meaning experiences. And you just sometimes though, when you actually get this feeling of just you immerse yourself in the movie, you just sort of feel like you're part of a team, and you remember that stuff. And I can still look back now, even though some of them were like 5, 6, 7 years ago. But I mean, still, you look back and you're like, it's actually a pretty damn good memory. I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, you get to have those crazy experiences with the cast and the crew. You go out after a long day, or you kind of get bonded like family, especially on those night shoots when you're going till like 4 or 5 in the morning and you didn't start until like 8 at night the previous day. Those you get a lot of bonding experience on.
Yeah, definitely. It's always about, forming that team. That's something I always sort of preach here, is about, make sure that the people you can work with, or the people that you choose for your team, are people that you can work with. Because, we got to make sure, you're able to form as an actual cohesive team. Ron, I know we're sort of running out of time. I had a couple of questions come in from the audience. Would you mind answering a few?
Yeah, sure.
The first question that came in was, how do you feel about formulas in screenwriting? Which I think they're referring to, like Save the Cat and, the sequencing method.
I think if you are a starting writer, if you are looking to quote unquote break into the industry, then I think your first couple screenplays that you write should be a bit formulaic in that sense, because those first couple screenplays that you write are not going to be the screenplays that get you the Oscar. They're not going to be the screenplays that get you the Emmy. What they're going to be is they're going to be writing samples that get you representation. And what representation wants to see from starting out writers is that you're not trying to make these crazy avant-garde films. Bergman didn't make Persona until later in his career. So you want to start with formula, and then you can break it down. But I mean, it's a slippery slope, because you can almost say that every film has a formula. Every film has a, first cause of action. Every film has a climax and catharsis and a midpoint and blah, blah, blah. But, stick to it. If you're a starting out screenwriter, stick to it, because you're going to use that as writing samples to get you other work, to get you representation. And then from there, you can branch yourself out.
Okay, very cool. We have another question that came in, and that was, which story proved to be the most difficult to make it work for all the characters involved, and why?
Oh, man. I mean, it's funny because I've worked on a lot of scripts as well that have never even seen the light of day. And I'll say this, there's one that I worked on 5 years ago. And, where is it? Oh, that's the script right here. Where is it? I thought I had the script. But anyways, I worked on this script 5 years ago, and now it finally went into production, and we're shooting in Italy next summer, and it's called Enzo Ferrari. and it's the biopic of the man who started Ferrari. And Christian Bale's going to play him, and it's got Naomi Rapace in it, and Michael Mann's directing it. I worked on that script 5 years ago when one of the original drafts was drafted by Jeb and Jez Butterworth, and that was, oh, man, I remember the characters back then were so entangled, and you had to kind of individually pull them apart like sticky spaghetti and figure out what each one's desire was and wanted for the story. And I remember that being probably the most incredibly difficult. Unfortunately, I can't speak too much more about it because the film's, we're shooting next summer, so it's going to be coming out in 2 years and after that. But I would say that's probably the most one. Out of the other films that have actually come out, probably Wolf. Wolf was kind of crazy because there were so many cogs and pieces to that machine as far as characters go, all centered around Jordan. And there was multiple drafts of that script, which, by the way, I just pulled up the original ending. And the original ending was just going to end with the same montage that you see at the beginning of the film as him as a young kid with his father. I believe they used a picture at like a baseball field. It was that, and then it cuts to Jordan's estate, and he uses a black Amex to cut 2 lines of coke on an elaborate aux table, and he speaks directly to the camera. Of all my addictions, there was one above that ultimately brought me down. He peels a crisp $100 bill off a wad, rolls it up. Looks like he's about to snarf up a line, but Jordan says, "I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about this." And Jordan unfurls the $100 bill with a snap. So that scene that you see in the beginning of the film, that was also really popular in the trailer, that he's saying the thing that can obliterate your enemies is money. That was actually the original ending of the script.
Oh, wow. That's very cool. Well, thank you for that. I mean, and this is amazing that I now, now that everyone knows what the alternate ending is. So thank you for that, Ron. Yeah. And, I can imagine Wolf being the toughest because, I mean, there were so many characters in there. And there was Jonah Hill's character. He played an integral role, and there's just so many other, of Jordan's guys, of his crew, that were, I'm sure, when you were going through the script that you were like, okay, now we got to keep track of all these guys,
Yeah, and that was also a film that we were constantly working on, like, while it was being shot, and there was a lot of improving going on set. So after we're done shooting on set, we're watching dailies and we're saying, oh man, this will be great, because they were all so funny. I mean, there was so many, like, there's probably a good 4 or 5 hours of additional scenes that didn't make the film that I am just hoping that they release in like a bonus DVD, because the original cut, before Marty took the film to his house in New York to cut it down personally because we were running out of time for the release date, the original cut was like 6.5 hours. And it was just like, because there's so much you can kind of play with as far as actors go in those scenes, and we can be, oh, try this. Oh, yeah, do that. And so, yeah, you're constantly trying to like reel everybody in a sense, and keep everybody online towards the goal of the scene. And then you're also having to rewrite, like, oh my God, that was hilarious, let's use this. Like Matthew's the chest beating line, which has become very famous from it, like that was all improv. I mean, that was kind of like, Leo was like, let's just shoot it, and Marty was like, okay. And that's just how that played out. So like you're constantly reworking this story while it's being filmed.
If they release a 6-hour cut, that would be phenomenal. But yeah, maybe one day they will release a 6-hour cut. There's a guy I know who I'm trying to get on the podcast. He had a 6-hour cut of his movie that he shot it with Comedy Central, and Comedy Central basically flat out said, we're never going to release a 6-hour version of this. You'll get the 90-minute version, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so the last question that came in is, do you think a writer can break in / get past the gatekeepers with a screenplay that doesn't strictly follow the 3-act structure?
Well, it depends. It depends. First off, it better be a really damn good story. It better be a damn good screenplay. Otherwise, because the gatekeeper are the readers. They're the people that aren't really even paid that much, that work as assistants or just readers at the studios or agencies. So those are your quote unquote gatekeepers you got to get past first. And if you can somehow make the story intriguing early on, and you can get us hooked early on, and keep the story progressing and building, then yeah, it's going to be hard. As far as like, if it's your first screenplay, if you're trying to break in, I wouldn't recommend doing it. I mean, I would recommend just getting you want like a good solid 3 features and a couple TV show treatments and Bibles under your quote unquote portfolio that you can use as writing samples to get you the representation. Then you can work on those films, those screenplays that are more avant-garde in the sense that they don't follow a 3-act structure. Maybe they follow more Shakespearean 5 or Mammoth 4. But also at the same time, I mean, who am I to tell you that you can't? I mean, I didn't listen to anybody, so I suggest, follow your heart in that sense. And shooting and making films is so much less expensive than what it once was. So, maybe you can also shoot it and make it yourself, at the same time.
Yeah, very good point, Ron. With the advent of crowdfunding now, and shooting on digital, there's a lot more opportunities now available to filmmakers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. I kind of love it. I mean, it gives this freedom to the artist that like they've never had in a long time.
Yeah. And as the various guests I have on here, that's something we discuss is, which route would you take? And, you can choose the route we were just talking about. You could choose the route of entering a competition and hopefully you place in there. You could go the route of sending it to a studio and hope a reader gives it hope the reader passes it up the chain of command, so to speak. So, that all these, there's a lot of different factors that play into it.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you and I wrote a $200 million Pirates of the Caribbean, that's not something that we're going to be able to shoot in our backyard. But,
no, but it's also something that we wouldn't be able to really break a 3-act structure from at the same time, because
very true.
Studios that dish out that amount of money for those films. I mean, even Wolf was like just around $100 million budget, but even still, there's a lot of input from producers and studio execs that are putting their neck out on the line for investing this much in a film, and they're going to want you to follow an almost kind of guaranteed structure in a way.
Yeah, I can totally see what you mean. It's sort of like nobody wants a repeat of Land of the Lost, where, I remember when that came out, and I remember, all the articles on the Hollywood Reporter and Variety about, the execs who all greenlit that were all canned. And they said, why would you invest all this money into a TV show, an old TV show from the 70s, 60s, I think?
Yeah, it was something, 60s, I believe.
Yeah, and it's just, so I completely understand what you're saying. Just hearing interviews too from other directors and writers, just about getting notes about the dailies and getting notes about this, and what notes do you take, what notes do you just sort of, I think it was maybe Craig Mazin was saying that one time he got notes and he said, okay, well, thank you very much for these, and he went about on his day, and the next day he got more notes, but it was basically the same notes but written differently. And he was like, what the hell? So he's like, okay, guys, I'll take these notes into consideration too. But yeah, there is a lot of money at stake, and there is a lot of people with their necks on the line. But
yeah,
Ron, I want to, I know, we're pretty much running out of time. I want to say, thank you very much for coming on. Is there any sort of anything you want to say to sort of, put a period at the end of this sentence?
Right. If you're a writer, declare yourself a writer and declare yourself the best writer, and just write every day and just go forth with that. And you said earlier about, deciding which route to take, to go screenplay festival, to go agents, to, the best route I think is to just take all of them. Take all of them, see what options you get back, and then you get to choose. Because if you have one choice, one option, you got nothing. If you got two, you still got nothing. But if you have three options to choose from, you have a choice. So I would say that. I would say it's a very kind of hard-working industry. You got to think of it from the fact that there are people moving to LA and from all over the world trying to compete with their script to get their script made, and you have to go into that sense where, like, every day I'm going to commit to this, and sometimes that's going to require you to miss out on other things, but it will pay off in the end if you put the work in now, is the best thing I can say.
And Ron, I think that's a great way to end this episode of the podcast. Ron, again, I want to say thank you very much for coming on. And where can people find you out online?
Mostly just Instagram, Twitter. My handle is @RonAuteur, RONAUTEUR. I don't think I do much else online. my computer is actually mostly in airplane mode when I'm writing. So
I will link to all his social media channels in the show notes, everyone. Again, I found Ron on Instagram. That's how we started talking. Again, you can find me at davebullis.com. Twitter, it's @Dave_Bullis. Ron, again, thanks for coming on and sharing everything with us. And I wish you the best with all your future projects.
Thank you, Dave. Same to you, man. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Ron, again, have a great night, buddy.
Thank you. You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.